You think you deserve that money? That trust fund belongs to Tiffany now. She's better than you'll ever be. The words from my stepmother's phone call hit me like a punch to the gut. I gripped the edge of the hotel desk to steady myself, my pulse hammering in my ears. Janet's voice oozed smugness as she informed me gleefully that she'd drained the trust fund my mother had left for me. My name is Gabriel Mitchell, 28 years old, and I thought I'd finally outrun the dysfunction that haunted my family after my mother died. I work in pharmaceutical sales, which keeps me traveling all over the country. It should have been just another Tuesday in Minneapolis, another hotel, another client meeting tomorrow. Instead, I was listening to Janet gloat about robbing me of my future. "Thanks for letting me know," I said, keeping my tone even. My voice didn't betray a hint of the fury building inside me. I could imagine her surprise at my calm. She'd expected yelling, begging, maybe tears, anything but silence and restraint. "That's it?" she snapped. "That's all you have to say?" "Tiffany needs that money for her wedding and new house," she added, her voice sharpening. "You're just wasting it chasing around some sales career like a damn drifter." I thought of my mom. She died when I was 16, a self-made businesswoman who built a consulting firm from scratch and left a trust fund to support my goals. She wanted me to have choices, freedom. Janet, who married my dad barely 2 years after my mum passed, had never respected that. She'd been circling that fund like a vulture for over a decade, ever since she dragged her daughter Tiffany into our house and tried to rebrand us all as one big happy family. But what Janet didn't know was that 6 months ago, I had lunch with Mr. Harrison, my mom's old lawyer. He'd flagged some unusual questions coming from Janet and advised we tighten up the legal safeguards. Together, we locked that trust down with clauses that didn't just make unauthorized access unlikely, it made it criminal. "You've always been such a disappointment," Janet hissed, taking one last shot. "Your stepsister deserves this more than you ever did." I ended the call, no dramatic exit, no rebuttal, just silence. Then I turned toward the window and watched the Minneapolis skyline blur in the glass. My hands were still trembling, but not from fear. Because this time, I was ready. Everything was documented, every manipulation, every shady phone call, every attempt to coerce or steal. She had overplayed her hand, and she was about to find out exactly how much that mistake was going to cost her. While my dad buried himself in work to cope with the loss of my mom, Janet quietly made her move, pushing me out of the picture one subtle jab at a time. Tiffany became the golden child. Every minor school project was cause for cake and streamers. Meanwhile, my academic scholarships and acceptance into a top business school passed unnoticed. Janet was a master manipulator. She filtered what my dad saw, tailored every conversation, steered every moment. By the time he got home at night, he was too tired or too distracted to notice anything but the version of the truth she fed him. The real wake-up call came during my college graduation. I'd worked my ass off top of my class, landed a dream offer with a major firm, all while juggling a part-time job. My dad didn't show up. Tiffany had a cold. "She needs her father more than you do right now," Janet had said without shame. That was the moment I realized things would never change, unless I changed them. I packed my things the next day and moved out. I stopped waiting for validation and started building a future on my own terms. I never touched the trust fund. Not because I didn't need it, but because accessing it meant exposing myself to Janet's meddling. Every visit home came with a lecture about how lucky I was, and how unfair it was that Tiffany didn't get the same opportunities. 6 months ago, Mr. Harrison, my mom's attorney, called me. "She's been asking questions," he said, "about the trust. More than just curious." Everything clicked. Janet had been laying the groundwork for years. Waiting, watching, biding her time until I was distracted or vulnerable enough to pull off whatever plan she'd been hatching. But I wasn't a defenseless 16-year-old anymore. I was my mother's son, and I'd learned a thing or two about how to protect what mattered. That trust fund wasn't just money. It was my mom's legacy, her way of giving me the tools to create something of my own. Sitting on the edge of the hotel bed that night, I pulled out the worn photo I always kept of her. She was smiling, confident, proud, the kind of person I still aspired to become. I owed it to her to see this through. I dialed Mr. Harrison. My fingers were steady, even with the heat still burning behind my ribs. He picked up on the second ring, his voice calm and familiar. "She made her move," I said without preamble. "She claims everything's been transferred to Tiffany." "I was expecting that," he replied. "I got an alert this morning. She tried to access the account." I exhaled, a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "So?" "Not a cent moved," he confirmed. "The safeguards worked exactly as we designed. Every unauthorized attempt has been logged. We've got ironclad proof. This is prosecutable fraud." I sat in silence for a beat, letting it land. All the manipulation, the comments, the slow, poisonous erosion of my relationship with my father. Janet had been so sure she'd win, she hadn't even considered I might be 2 steps ahead. He waited. "Gabriel, would you like me to move forward?" I stared out the hotel window, the Minneapolis skyline still glowing in the night. "Yes," I said, "let's make this official." "I think it's time to end this," I said firmly. "Send the evidence to the family lawyer and copy my dad on everything. I want him to see exactly what his wife tried to do." "Consider it done," Mr. Harrison replied. "And Gabriel, your mother would be proud. She always said you were sharper than most people realized." After we hung up, I opened my laptop and booked an earlier flight home. The sales meeting in Minneapolis could wait. I had a family issue to deal with, and this time I was taking control. The next morning, I landed in Boston. The fall air was crisp, sharp in my lungs. My dad's house looked exactly the same as I remembered it growing up. But I didn't feel like the same man walking up those front steps. I'd called ahead to let him know I was visiting, but I hadn't mentioned Janet's little phone call. Some things needed to be said face to face. When I stepped into the living room, all 3 of them were there: Dad, Janet, and Tiffany. Janet's confident smile faded the second she saw me. I didn't look angry. I didn't look emotional. That alone seemed to rattle her. "Gabriel?" Dad said, eyebrows knitting. "I thought you were coming later. Everything okay?" "Actually, no," I said calmly, pulling out my phone. "We need to talk." I opened the file Mr. Harrison had sent. PDFs, signed affidavits, time-stamped records, and turned the screen toward my father. "Janet called me yesterday, said she emptied my trust fund and gave it all to Tiffany. I thought you should see what really happened." Janet blanched. "I was just trying to help Tiffany." "Don't." My voice was low, firm, controlled. "Every attempt you made to access the trust fund was recorded. Every call, every forged document, every time you tried to manipulate the bank, it was logged. It's all here." I handed the phone to my father. His hands shook slightly as he scrolled. I could see the shift in his expression: confusion, giving way to horror, then shame. "Janet." "Ah, what did you do?" he said quietly, his voice sounding hollow. "She's lying," Tiffany blurted, already red in the face. "Gabriel's always been jealous of me. I also brought this." I pulled a printed copy of the trust's current balance from my briefcase. The money's still there, safe, untouched. Janet's attempts to move it failed because I took precautions, months ago. "You set me up," Janet spat. "No," I said. "I protected what my mother left me, just like she taught me to." The silence in the room was thick. My dad stared at the screen, scrolling through damning email chains, flagged documents, and even audio transcripts. Everything Mr. Harrison had compiled over the last 6 months. Every manipulation, every forged note, every behind-the-scenes move Janet had made while pretending to play the caring stepmother. "I did this for our family," Janet tried again, voice shaking. "Stop." My dad's voice cracked. "Just stop." He looked at her, really looked at her, and his hands dropped to his sides, still holding the papers. "You forged my signature. You tried to steal from my son." His eyes moved to me, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years: regret, guilt. "Gabriel, I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't." "Of course you didn't," I said, voice quiet now. She made sure of that. The documents had been arranged chronologically. Mr. Harrison had done an excellent job laying it all out. Emails, inquiries to the bank, even recorded phone calls Janet made while pretending to be me. She'd been trying to siphon money for years. But now, it was all out in the open. "This is insane. Tiffany exploded. Mum was just trying to make things fair. Gabriel always had everything handed to him. Handed? I looked at her, shaking my head. I worked through college. I built my career on my own. I've never touched that trust fund, not once. You don't get to rewrite the truth just because it makes you uncomfortable, Janet finally snapped. You ungrateful little... I've already filed charges, I interrupted, standing tall. The bank has everything. Mr. Harrison is moving forward. This is attempted fraud, and you're not getting away with it. I turned back to my father. I'm sorry you had to find out like this, I said, but you needed to know. 12 years of deceit, manipulation, and wedge driving had just collapsed in front of him. He looked at Janet like he didn't even recognize the woman he'd married. Then he stood, hands trembling, eyes glassy, trust broken wide open. Janet, I want you out of this house, tonight. My father's voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. Janet's face twisted in disbelief. What? She shrieked, her voice rising to that familiar screech. You can't be serious, after everything I've done for this family. For this family, my dad echoed, quieter but unshakable. You tried to steal from my son. You forged my name. You've been lying to me for years. Tiffany sat frozen, tears streaking her face, but this time they didn't seem like an act. She looked stunned, hollow, like a kid who just realized the adult in the room wasn't who she thought they were. I stepped forward. The police will want to talk to you, I told Janet, my tone calm but razor-edged. Mr. Harrison has already filed reports. The bank's fraud division is involved. It's only a matter of time. You planned this, Janet hissed, her eyes burning with rage. You knew I'd try to access the trust. No, Janet, I said evenly, you planned this. I just made sure I was ready. I turned to my father. There's more. Mr. Harrison found evidence she's been siphoning money from your personal accounts too. Small withdrawals, regular, over years. Dad sank into his chair like the air had been knocked from his chest. He looked 10 years older in that moment. I felt a flash of guilt, not for exposing the truth, but for how long he'd been living in a lie. He didn't speak right away. When he finally did, his voice was cold and final. Get out, he said again. Both of you. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce. As Janet and Tiffany scrambled to gather their things, alternating between shrieking denials, teary excuses, and wild accusations, I stood by the window, hands in my pockets, quiet. It was the same window where I used to wait for my mum to pull into the driveway after work. The same spot where I learned how to hope. I could almost hear her voice again. Be ready, sweetheart, and never let anyone take what's rightfully yours. In the weeks that followed, my dad and I had some of the conversations we'd avoided for over a decade. Real conversations. In the kitchen where my mum once helped me with algebra and reheated leftover pasta, we finally talked like two men with shared scars. I failed you, he said one evening, staring into a mug of black coffee that had long gone cold. After your mum died, I was scared, so damn scared of being alone. I didn't want to believe anything bad about Janet. And I didn't protect you. We both missed things, I admitted. I should have told you what I suspected years ago, but I needed proof. You needed to see it. He nodded, eyes fixed on the counter. She played me. All this time. The legal case moved faster than any of us expected. Janet was charged with attempted fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation. Her defense was predictable, trying to frame herself as the misunderstood stepmother, just trying to make things fair for Tiffany. But the paper trail destroyed that fantasy. The bank's logs were crystal clear. She'd been plotting for years. Tiffany emailed me a few weeks after the blow-up, said she hadn't known what her mother was doing, that she felt blindsided, betrayed. I wasn't sure I believed her, but I did recognize the look on her face that night. Shock, confusion, shame. She was trying to untangle her mother's lies from her own identity, and I knew how hard that could be. I didn't respond right away. Some wounds take longer to examine than to inflict. Janet, I want you out of this house, tonight. My dad's voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the finality in it. Janet's face contorted. What? She screeched. You can't be serious after everything I've done for this family. For this family, he repeated quietly. You tried to steal from my son. You forged my signature. You've been lying to me for years." Tiffany started crying, but this time it didn't feel like the usual performance. Her eyes darted between her mother and my dad like she was just realizing what had really been happening behind closed doors. "The police will want to speak to you," I told Janet, stepping forward. "Mr. Harrison's already filed the reports. The bank's fraud team is involved." "You planned this," Janet spat, her voice venomous. "You knew I'd go after the trust." "No, Janet, you planned this," I said, steady. "I just made sure I was ready when you did." I turned to my dad. "There's more. Mr. Harrison found out she's been skimming money from your account too. Small amounts, years of it." Dad slumped back into his chair like the weight of everything had finally settled on him. He looked shattered, and while I hated seeing him like that, he needed to know the truth. "Get out," he repeated, "both of you. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce." Janet and Tiffany left in a flurry of tears, slammed doors, and dramatic accusations. I didn't move. I just stood by the window, the same one I used to stare out of, waiting for Mum to come home from work. I could almost hear her voice. "Always be prepared, sweetheart, and never let anyone take what's rightfully yours." In the weeks that followed, my dad and I finally really talked for the first time in over a decade. We sat in the kitchen where Mum used to help me with my homework. It felt like we were dusting off something fragile but still intact. "I failed you," he said one evening, his fingers wrapped around a mug of coffee. "After your mom died, I couldn't be alone. I rushed into something I didn't understand." "We both made mistakes," I said. "I should have told you what was going on with Janet years ago, but I needed you to see it for yourself." The legal proceedings were swift. Janet pled out to avoid jail, but the restitution hit hard. She was barred from ever working in finance again. Last I heard, she'd moved to Arizona to live with her sister. Tiffany sent me an email a few weeks later. She said she hadn't known what her mom was doing. Maybe that was true, maybe not. But I understood the kind of emotional damage she was dealing with. "I always thought you had everything handed to you," Mom made it sound that way. "But now I realize she was just jealous of what your mom gave you." With Mr. Harrison's help, I launched my own consulting firm. Something I'd always wanted to do, but never quite had the freedom or confidence to pursue. The trust fund my mum left me became the seed that made it all possible. During one of our meetings, Mr. Harrison said, "Your mother would be proud, Gabriel. She always said you had her business sense and your father's heart. She knew you'd do something great when you were ready." Dad started showing up at my office once a week for lunch. We'd share stories about Mum, things we hadn't talked about in years. He was finally starting to look like himself again, the man I remembered before grief took him under. "You know what your mum used to say about you?" he asked one day. "She said you were like a diamond, pressure just made you stronger." Life found a new rhythm. My firm grew fast. I built a team. One of my first hires was Sarah A., brilliant analyst with the same fire my mum had. Same dedication, same drive to prove herself. Janet's name rarely came up anymore. Her chapter in our lives had closed. Tiffany stayed in Boston, working as a teacher's assistant. Our contact was minimal, an occasional email, maybe a holiday greeting. That was enough. Looking back, I understood what my mum really left me. It wasn't just a trust fund. It was a blueprint, a lesson, a legacy. She taught me how to protect myself, how to stay strong, and above all, how to move forward when life tries to pull you back. Dad threw himself into rebuilding our relationship. He started sharing stories about Mom that he'd kept buried for years, how they met at a business conference, how they struggled to launch her company, the late nights spent planning their future. Each story helped heal a part of what we'd lost. One evening, while sorting through old photos in the attic, we found Mum's business journal. Inside was a letter addressed to me, dated just weeks before she passed. "My dearest Alex, I'm leaving you more than money. I'm leaving you the freedom to choose your path. Don't let anyone dim your light or tell you what you deserve. You are stronger than you know, smarter than they give you credit for, and capable of anything you put your mind to. Trust yourself. I do. Love, Mom." Those words became my mantra as I built my business. I framed the letter and hung it in my office, a daily reminder of where I came from and where I was going. Dad retired from his job and began volunteering at a grief counseling center. helping other families navigate loss. Sometimes he consulted with my firm, offering years of experience and perspective that complemented my approach. Looking back 5 years later, I'm still amazed at how much changed. My consulting firm now operates in 3 cities, helping pharmaceutical companies streamline their operations just like Mum used to do. The trust fund she left me didn't just secure my future, it became the foundation for helping others build theirs. Dad fully retired last year, but he still visits the office weekly to mentor junior employees. We have lunch every Wednesday, making up for all the years we lost to Janet's manipulation. But the hardest lesson I learned wasn't about money or betrayal. It was about standing up for myself. Mom knew one day I'd have to fight for what was mine, and she gave me the tools to do it. She taught me that real strength isn't about being aggressive. It's about being prepared and patient enough to act at the right time. Sometimes I visit the old house. Dad still lives there, though everything feels different now. The walls have been repainted, the furniture rearranged, every trace of Janet erased. In Mom's old office, now a small library, I found her collection of business books. In one, she'd written notes about teaching me to run the company one day. I never got that chance with her, but I'm building something of my own now, and in every decision I make, I can hear her voice. The trust fund wasn't just money, it was her belief in me. Her way of reminding me, don't back down when someone tries to take what's yours. Janet's attempt to steal my inheritance taught me something important. Some people will show you who they are, and when they do, you'd better be ready. I'm grateful for those difficult years. They shaped me into a man my mother would be proud of. Not just someone who survives setbacks, but someone who grows stronger because of them. The photo albums have been reorganized, only the memories that matter remain. On my desk at work sits my favorite picture, Mom and me at her office, laughing at something long forgotten. It reminds me every day that while some people try to tear you down, others build you up in ways that last a lifetime. On the anniversary of her passing, Dad and I visited her grave. We brought fresh flowers from her favorite garden, a tradition we started that year. I read him the letter I found in her journal. He held it carefully, hands trembling. She was always thinking ahead, he said quietly, voice thick with emotion. Even when she was fighting for her own life, she was fighting for yours too. And in that moment I understood. Every step I took to protect her legacy, every choice to stand firm, every decision to build something meaningful, that was her final gift to me. She'd be proud of you, Dad said, placing a hand on my shoulder, and I'm proud to call you my son. We stood there in silence, letting it all sink in. Some wounds never fully heal, but love and resilience can turn even the deepest scars into strength.